Today, I will be talking about privacy or our progress, and I'm going to talk about 25 minutes about data privacy, and I promise it's more fun than it sounds, but only slightly. And to be honest, we messed up. In Airflow 2.10, .0, I think, if I'm correct, we've enabled a tool called Scarf. And Scarf is a third-party company where we were sending telemetry data to. And telemetry is not open telemetry in this case. It's telemetry data about what kind of installation you're actually running at that moment. And this was enabled by default. And unfortunately, it was also unclear what was sent. We didn't really make that evident to anyone. It was there, you could find it. We were not hiding it, but we were not communicating about it. So communication was also indeed lacking. And while we were going ahead with this implementation, sometimes even making changes to it, somebody reached out to us and was saying, hey guys, I was completely surprised by this, and it could have costed me my job, and I got really scared. Obviously, that is not what we would like to be at Jarek.
Just to add to it, this person is here.
Oh, this person is here.
I'm not sure if yes, he's here.
You'll have it, John.
Oh, fortunately. Now, well, here you go. Well, I'm really happy that you're here, actually, then, because then, well, we go through this talk and you learn a little bit more and maybe can even, give some feedback to what we would like to do now in the future. So hence, we were listening and we've ripped it out pretty quickly, and I think we should do a better job. Basically, that's what this is. Nevertheless, we desperately need data to build a better product. Airflow is hugely complex. It's been, there is obviously also a lot of technical depth by now over the, I think I'm 10 years involved, even a little bit more now, that Airflow exists. And we would like to understand where we should put our effort at. There is only limited time in the world, and still what we're doing is a human business. We would like to spend it where there is the most effect. But we do like to do that without, people losing their job, obviously. So the type of questions we would like to answer is, hey, are people actually using this operator that we spent 6 months building? Or can we by now deprecate Python 3.9 support, but maybe it's still with 40% of the deployments? Which providers should we actually prioritize? Which providers are the most useful to people? So open source sustainability requires understanding the usage. At the moment, we're flying blind, and it means we're wasting contributor time and making wrong decisions, possibly and most likely, because there's no telemetry data at all currently inside Airflow. However, maybe with the larger cloud providers, it is there, but we don't know about it. There are kind of 3 blocks in the world about how we deal with data and the different perspectives at it. So in China, the trust flows upward to authority, and this is reinforced by traditional Confucian values, emphasizing social hierarchy and modern regulatory frameworks. So that is a bit different from what happens in the United States, where I would argue, and I'm doing this from a European perspective, that there is a Wild West with emerging pockets of protection, like the CCPA in California, but it's state-by-state patchwork. Corporate surveillance might be there by default, because nobody is complaining about Google tracking everything, but freak out when open source asks for feature usage. Nevertheless, I would argue that Europe with its GDPR has the gold standard. It's privacy by design and minimizes data. The concepts that matter, even when GDPR doesn't fully technically apply, like data controllers, processors, legitimate interest, make still sense in the things that we try to accomplish. We are not here to identify people. We are not here to identify companies even. So even though the GDPR doesn't apply to personal data, to non-personal data, its principles give us the right framework for building trust, because that is what we lost when we enabled telemetry data at an earlier point. Why is this hard? Well, certain things like IP addresses are unavoidable. If you send over data, telemetry data to us, you make a connection from your originating IP to us, and that is going to be logged somewhere without us even wanting it, but it will be there. Even anonymous data can be fingerprinted. So you might be thinking that now you would say that certain data is not identifiable to a particular user or a particular installation, but if you're not careful by combining different data sources, then it might actually be. And there's also a dilemma, because the dilemma is with the big players. If AWS, Google, and Astronomer, who deploy about 80% of the installations of Airflow, if they don't opt in, well, how valuable is the data that we actually have? So we are facing some challenges, and I would like to actually give the floor a little bit to you, because I'm going to ask you a couple of questions. Question one is, have you ever disabled a telemetry in a tool? All live. Thank you so much. Well, that was not an unexpected answer. Indeed, we see that most of you have disabled it. I'm not going to ask for the reasons right now, but it's evident that that there's a tendency to remove it. What would be your biggest concern about Airflow telemetry? Would that be privacy, security, performance, transparency, or something else? Awesome. I'm not surprised about security, because if you think about confidentiality, integrity, availability in the context of public companies or companies, then typically you would argue security, data leakage would be that privacy is here or there. I also understand that, because that was also earlier in other occasions there. So again, no surprise here. Transparency, that was a bit lower, maybe, yes, to a certain extent. Let's go to the next question. Would you enable telemetry if it was opt-in and transparent? I love the probably part. Thank you again. Again, also no surprises, I would argue. Actually the yes is quite high, because in real life, what you see when people are asked to enable telemetry, about 3 to 7% would enable it. So that's with other tooling. So it's always a bit of a challenge to get people, convinced that you could do it, because there's a safe side to it. There's a risk aversion. If you don't share, there is no risk, and if you do share, there is a risk. So we might need to incentivize people in a way that there's value in enabling it, possibly, or indeed removing some of the risk perception that might exist. Now, this is an open question. What would you be willing to share? And this is around what kind of items you think you could share if you would share. So think about operators, the amount of operators, maybe the names of operators, the amount of tasks, these version information, indeed, what's your deployment model? Are you deploying on cloud? Are you deploying on premise? These kind of things you could think of. It's fully open. Passwords. Well, I really appreciate your transparency then. Metadata is very elaborate. We were talking about metadata, hopefully, here. All right. In the interest of time, I'll move on. But thank you for sharing this. This will be input also for the future. And I like basically what I'm seeing on the type of operators, the number of DACs, version information. It is indeed, by the way, the type of information we're looking for. So again, it's not that we want to have like significant other information there, but it's information you're willing to share, and we would like to have basically to be able to steer the direction of the project. And we're still adding. I think you're getting very enthusiastic here now. How many people are in this room, and we're getting as many items there almost.
There are some secrets, but
There are even secrets and passwords. Okay, here you go. So yeah, okay. What? Yeah. All right. Let me switch again back to the presentation. So now let's introduce Matomo. I don't know how many people of you know Matomo, but Matomo is a analytics framework that typically is used in web analytics. So think about Google Analytics, but then an open source version of it, which is then hosted at the Apache Software Foundation. And it would be possible to remove Scarf as a receiver from the data that we have, or the telemetry that would be there, and have that as a first party. And that gives us obviously a couple of advantages, because it has, if we host it at the ASF, we're the processor and the controller of the data at the same time, which means the privacy statement that the Apache Software Foundation has is fully applicable, and there is no other incentive, possible incentive, because Scarf has to be honest, has been very straight up until now. Let's not talk about Scarf, but we would like to have it in one hand and be able to control it from end to end. You can find Matomo, the installation of it, at analytics.apache.org, and I think even the website is currently analyzed for it, and so are several other projects. It is also, because it's a first party, compliancy becomes a lot easier. So in that way, it might be a way to get out of the squeeze what we have with Matomo, or with Scarf, because they did have something in their privacy statement that made us realize that it was kind of open-ended with the way they were treating, how they could change the privacy statement in the future, and what they could do with the data in the future. But then let's go back a little bit to the questions again. Should telemetry be opt-in or opt-out? But it's a clear stance here, even in this room, where maybe more maintainers are present than typically are present, right? That we're still going for an opt-in situation here. So I would argue still opt-in is the one that would be acceptable for people. Would you trust telemetry more if the collection infrastructure was open source? Again, a clear answer, so thank you for that. It is definitely a clear yes also in this one. So that makes things a lot easier going forward. Now there is a little bit more of a more difficult question, or possibly the more difficult question. Should large cloud providers get access to insights even if they don't share any data themselves? It's a very clear answer. Again, thank you. Well, I'm quite happy about that. So, another proposal, and I think Jarek is going to be happy about this one, and some other people as well. So this morning I finalized my homework in writing AIP 89, which discusses doing telemetry in Airflow. And to give you a little bit of a gist, the intention is to do it opt-in with differential privacy. So what does that mean? That we would add a little bit of noise to certain items to make sure that it is not identifiable to one installation, but still statistically relevant for people wanting to make decisions on the insights. Now the intention for the IP address is to do that at country level. So as soon as we are able to do it, and then we remove the data from the IP address that is sensitive to it, and then leave it at country level possibly. That's the suggestion currently, and obviously it's open for discussion, which is the AIP, because it has not been voted upon and it has not been discussed, obviously. So there is a inside the AIP discuss a daily session, which is unique to a deployment, but also not unique across days. So basically it changes over a day, but you'll have there are different deployments in that way. So you will not be able to connect them to an individual in the individual installation, but you know that there are individual installations in that way. But the question is, and it's an open question for the what's next, is what do we do with dev installations versus production installations? You know, how do we differentiate between them, or don't we? There's also local aggregation involved. So this means if you don't, you know, the amount of tasks will be bucketed, for example. So if you have between 10 and 50 tasks or 10 and 50 DAGs, you'll end up in a bucket between 10 and 50. And if you have 5,000 tasks, you'll end up between 3,000 and 5,000. Again, not sharing the specific data, but just bucketing data that local aggregation happens locally. At the same time, there is also transparency involved, that you are able to actually see what kind of data will be sent in the near future to it, just by saying something like Airflow telemetry show, something like that. And this, it will list out in a JSON what data is going to be sent over. And you can disable it at any time. Transparency also goes for changes to the telemetry that we would like to collect, because over time, there might be an incentive to change the type of telemetry you would like to receive. And my proposal would say that this would require a vote at the PMC or at the dev list, basically, to ensure that it's going to happen. So there's not just a PR at GitHub that somebody else reviews and says, oh, this is okay. No, this needs to be having a broader criteria there, and a broader yes than just the review mode on GitHub. And you as a administrator should always be in control. So while we in the AIP list that when installations happen, you might get a 10-second delay and the installation asking you for permission to turn on telemetry, the default will be no. But it will also be considered an unset situation. If you did not answer within the 10 seconds, then you will get at an admin page will ask you to reconfirm what you would, what the choice is going to be. There might be an upside to this, because that would turn it into a possibility for the cloud providers to have it turned on to leave the choice to the one using it, so the company using it, rather than having to set it at the installation time, because we record it inside the database rather than at the config file level necessarily. It still could be disabled at the config file, so you can do it, but it might open the door for the cloud providers or the managed service providers to leave it up to the companies using their services to make the choice consciously. So I hope indeed that eventually that we get to an I do situation on AIP 89 and we get a yes to that. So and transparency in the end also goes for public dashboards showing the aggregate data. Analytics.apache.org is already accessible, so that is already there. But we should make it quite clear in the release notes and communicate quite clearly where you can find these insights. So what's next? Well, there are still some open questions. Like I just mentioned, is there a different behavior for development versus production environments detected possibly by a database type or an explicit flag? What is the process for enterprises that don't share? Can they access the raw data? Can they access the aggregate insights? Should we offer a telemetry light mode with even less data for highly privacy-sensitive users? What specific noise levels provide the best balance between privacy and utility? Should we implement a trust score showing telemetry participation rate to encourage adoption? And now I get my time out. Thank you. Thank you for having me here.